A person is only as strong as their word, but every day, the world dares you to break it. Integrity with Red Shea is for the ones who refuse to do so. Red spent 12 years in federal prison because he wouldn't break his word. Now, he's talking with people who've done the same. From their battles, you'll see how to stand tall when everything around you falls. Because in a world hell-bent on destroying you, your integrity is the only thing that will protect you. This is Integrity with Red Shea.
I have a special guest today, a real stand-up guy, a guy from that was in Los Angeles, and he was in my trade, if you will, and stood up like a man when his time came, just like I did. Louis Ziskin, how are you?
Good, Red. How you doing? Thanks
Good.
for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So, for the audience to understand, you were a kingpin in your Ecstasy, and
well, they called me that. When I was doing it, I didn't think of myself as a kingpin.
They called you that, exactly.
I had
exactly.
no idea, actually, how big we were in relative until the bus came.
And you were based in Beverly Hills?
Los Angeles, yeah, Beverly Hills, all over Hollywood.
Okay. And yep, there you go. So let me just start with where you grew up and stuff like that, and where you came from.
I grew up in LA, divorced parents, cheap seats in West Hollywood. It was actually 18th Street territory, Mexican gang. Never had a problem with them, you know, kind of average. My parents loved me, don't have them to blame for anything. I just always tried to find the easy way through things, and as we both know, sometimes what we think is the easy way doesn't turn out to be. And you know, went to school, was a mentally gifted minor, put in accelerated classes. I just wasn't engaged. The whole thing didn't engage me.
It didn't excite you.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough energy for you.
Yeah, it wasn't enough energy for me, and it didn't feel like if there were certain subjects that I liked, like math, I would engage in because I enjoyed the puzzle nature of it, right?
Sure.
But the memorization of history and history is important, but that was relatively easy for me. I couldn't engage with the discussions because I already felt like, hey, you know, what's the whole point here? Like, I got it already, you know?
Sure.
And so that's kind of was the problem with school. Now, obviously, looking back, part of that's my own fault. I certainly could have pointed myself in the direction of mathematics and physics and stuff like that, stuff that I found later interesting when I was in prison. I couldn't read enough of that stuff. And it was actually the first time I realized that I'd kind of shortchanged myself by undereducating myself. I was reading Stephen Hawking's critique on Einstein's papers, and I found the physics fascinating, and I realized that I couldn't do the math. And it was a moment of epiphany, actually, where I was like, I really fucked myself, didn't I? But, you know, such is life.
So you started getting into, was it Ecstasy right away or something?
No, you know, various scams. You know, we had you know, one of the first ones was the ATM machines had just come out. I don't know if you remember back in the day, but they used to have the receipts with the card number on the receipt before they started putting the XXX, right? So we set up a video camera across the street in a van and zoomed in on the thing, and we'd watch people put in their PIN numbers from an angle, and then we'd go and collect all the receipts at the end of the day and see if we could match up the account number with the PIN number. That ended pretty quickly because the banks caught on to that, but that was a good run for about a year. And then the counterfeit traveler's check thing, a friend of mine, Damon Kidwell, was putting himself through Cal Arts, and he had a job at Kinko's as a graphic designer at the time, and so he was really excited when this Canon color laser copier came out.
Oh yeah, let's make phony ones up.
Yeah, so everybody went over there all excited, you know, like, and he's showing us all this crazy stuff it could do, and then everybody goes back to his desk, back to his computer, and I took a bill out of my pocket, put it on the machine, and I was like, okay. And the next day I went to Bank of America with an eraser mate pen in Santa Monica, and I bought 3 $100 traveler's checks, signed it with the eraser mate pen, bought a plastic sheet of Mylar, a ruler, lined them up exactly, and started making copies. In 46 minutes you could make 30 grand, $300 per page. You learn to do the backs first because it has less ink, so it won't stick to the drum when you're doing the fronts, but figured that out pretty quick within a session, and that was the counterfeit traveler's check thing. Ultimately that led to $500 checks and $1,000 checks, and then I got lazy and started selling them instead of just cashing them myself, trying to scale. But the truth is, looking back, I was lazy, and that ended up getting me in trouble. Not for the first time, but the first time where it was serious. Ended up getting a year in the county, and I got kicked loose on, I hit the lottery, so I got out after 65 days.
Awesome.
Yeah.
To get out early, right?
Yeah. Back then it was $420 on a year in LA County, which is actually still to this day, of all the joints I've been, that's the absolute worst fucking place I've ever been.
Shithole.
Shithole. It was a nightmare, especially if you're white. I mean, just horrible.
And from there?
Oh, from there, then, I came out of that and just kind of beat around, selling, capturing cellular numbers and electronic serial numbers with the scanner, making clone phones, cable boxes, all the run-of-the-mill stuff, whatever it was, right? And, moving a little drugs here and there, but nothing serious. And then I ended up, a guy asked me if I would take a building into my name. He was going to pay me $100 grand. 13499 Biscayne Boulevard. It was a building called Sailboat Cay in North Miami Beach. And the guy, Judah Hertz, asked me to take it into my name because he was going to declare bankruptcy. He wanted me to declare bankruptcy on the building and collect rent. Now, what the hustle there is that it was a condo conversion. So once you have 51% of the units at that time sold, you have to start paying the HOA dues as the successor developer on the unsold units, which is a huge amount of money. So they want to sell these things out really fast. And what the scam there was, what Judah started with and what he'd done his whole life with a couple other guys, and they kind of built Miami. If you look up the history of it, Ike Gamble and Sonny Khan they were partners. Carriage Club, Alexander Hotel, all these famous buildings down there. And so what the hustle is, hey, you got a apartment building. You want to convert it to condo. So you go to the people in the apartment building at that time and you say, hey, listen, you're paying $1,000 a month rent. You're never going to own nothing. I'm going to give you 10 grand in cash, and your payment is going to be $800 a month mortgage. And they go, oh my God, amazing. And because of the non-qualifying loan situation at the time, they basically ran a version of the double escrow. It wasn't actually a double escrow. They kept 2 sets of books, but they'd say, okay, let's say we need $80,000 for this unit, right? Well, they'd go and say, okay, the unit's $100,000 or $110,000, and we already have a $30,000 deposit. So they'd claim that the deposit was already made directly to the developer from the buyer. So the bank's looking at the risk profile of it, and they kick out 90 G's. You cut a check back to the person in the apartment for 10. They buy new furniture. Instead of paying $1,000 a month rent, they're paying $800 a month in mortgage. Now the terms were horrible deals, but still, coming from $1,000 a month rent and nothing into $800 a month, even that you're upside down.
And the 10 grand.
And the 10 grand. So that's how they built, most of that stuff. Well, Judah got caught with this building. He had a Yale mortgage, hard money loan on it. And he got caught out with this where he didn't have enough buyers in a fast enough time. So he was stuck with the successor developer situation of having to pay the HOA for all the unsold units. So in comes me. He'll give me $100 grand. I declare bankruptcy, put the building in my name, and also rent those out instead of trying to sell them and collect rents. Well, I met a guy by the name of Mauricio Vivas, a Venezuelan gentleman who was in the emerald business. Met him with a couple girls out. He fancied the girls, got to talking. He takes us out on his boat, takes us to dinner, everything. You know how that opens doors.
Yep.
Next thing you know, he's buying the remaining 49 units. So after that, then a guy I knew over kind of a conflict with a girl earlier in my life, this kid Omar, he calls me and he says, we're friends at this time now, and he says, hey, what are you doing this summer? And I was like, oh, not much, you know. And he's like, come to Saint-Tropez. And I'm like, dude, I ain't going nowhere where fucking water is $80 a bottle. Fuck off, you know. I'd only heard stories about the place, right? Never been. So anyway, he's like, no, bring a few of the girls from LA and we will, you know, we'll pay for everything and da-da-da. I'm like, dude, I'm not a pimp. I can't guarantee you're going to bang any of these chicks, but I'm sure there's plenty of girls that want to go along for a trip to the French Riviera. He's like, yeah, we'll take care of everything. Just you promise us that you won't fuck them, and it's fine. You got a room and a car and everything, and we'll take care of everything. So we ended up going there, having a great time. End up in London after that. End up at a party with some Asian gentlemen who are basically, you know, kind of running things at the time. I didn't realize that they were the hierarchies of the time, but they were, even that they had their own thing, they were answerable to one of the families over there as well. It's I guess it'd be similar to where, you know, on the East Coast, stuff has been divided up for so long, you're not just going to come set up shop on a new corner, right?
Yeah,
whereas
no.
on the West Coast, if you have the strength, you can kind of do that, right? Like, and Europe is going to be much more like the East Coast, where the territories have been divided, and even families that are kind of enemies.
I think the reason for that is because you have a lot more European culture people in the Northeast more than you do in the West Coast. You know, I just think that whole culture from Europe is more prevalent in the East Coast.
Yeah. Also, it's been settled for longer too, right?
Yeah, that
I mean,
too.
I mean,
Exactly.
most of America, you know, besides the waves that have come after, but America was established by Europeans.
Right.
Right. And the big cities, Boston, New York, all these things were,
Right.
you know, the footholds were in place.
That's where it all started.
Yeah, that's where it all started, and, you know, came west from there, and, you know, through the twists and turns.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's like, you know, even families that are don't get along with each other will not allow a new person to come in and take any kind of territory.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
kind of a unifying thing. People that will normally fight with each other will, you know, align on that subject. Nobody new's coming in to take a piece of the pie.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't realize at the time. Over the years I did, and I basically was just kind of a snot-nosed kid coming off this French Riviera vacation, talking shit, and they had some shitty cocaine, and I know, you know, sometimes some yellow cocaine is considered very good, but this was the shitty kind, right? And I was like, I thought you guys were running shit, and they're like, oh, you could get better, mate. You're taking the fucking piss, da da da. And I was like, well, yeah, of course, I'm from LA. I didn't even have a Kilo Connect at the time, but I mean, I'd seen better coke at, you know, strip clubs in the bathroom. Right. So anyway, I come back to LA, and that's how it started. It really started as shipping cocaine to London, and the Ecstasy solved a problem. It was the problem of, once you get the cocaine to London, you have to bring back English pounds. And back then, in the late 90s, the Mexicans who had the cocaine, they didn't want anything to do with English pounds. This is pre-Eurodollar. They wanted only greenbacks. So now you're running around first you got to smuggle cash back, which means you're taking a free risk. Not a good business thing. A free felony is never a good thing. And then, so you could lose it there, and then you got to run around town, you know, with a bunch of fake IDs, cashing it in and losing, you know, 5-6% at these, you know, change places, which were much more prevalent back then. to have dollars again to buy it. So then the ecstasy kind of solved both of those issues. One, you're trading now cocaine for ecstasy instead of cash, and so you're bringing that back, which is it's a felony, but you're making money on that.
Sure.
Your ROI is increasing exponentially.
Everything's a risk, right?
Yeah. Everything, but at least if you have an ROI on it, you can make some kind of sense out of it, right? If you're doing, you're just being an idiot for no reason, that's not good business sense.
No.
So, and now when you sell those, you're not losing 5%, you're making a profit and you're getting dollars for it.
Right.
And so that kind of created the circle and allowed us to rapidly and exponentially grow.
In the ecstasy world.
Yeah, in the ecstasy world. It's just same as the cocaine world over there in London.
Sure.
And Amsterdam. I
would imagine it's easier to ship ecstasy, a lot easier than kilos of cocaine.
Well, it's funny, in the beginning what was crazy is we were using FedEx accounts, and I was blowing up all kinds of shit trying to figure out how to do this. I mean, looking back on it, I'm almost embarrassed to tell the story of how stupid it was. But, you're sending, back then it was $400 to send 200 kilos overnight FedEx, right? And we're putting 0 on the customs value. This is like how we were. Like, we were just a bunch of kids with more balls than brains, and, oh yeah, just get it going, And we're losing it, but we weren't losing it to customs. We were, ultimately customs, but Her Majesty's Customs and Excise, the tax people, were the ones that were like, well, what's worth $400 to ship that isn't worth anything to us? And the really stupid part of it is how we used to get the account numbers is we'd go down by the 10 freeway in Robertson was the main FedEx office. And back then in the 90s, everybody be standing in line at the FedEx office at the cutoff, trying to make the cutoff at 5 o'clock. So I'd be standing there with my fake FedEx envelope, just copying down people's account numbers, company account numbers. And there's a box that you can check when you're shipping international, charge customs to FedEx account number. So it wouldn't even cost us any more money. So once we got that figured out, then it was smooth sailing. But you start losing 20, 30 keys, you learn pretty quick.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine.
Yeah, if you don't, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that was the big hurdle. And then ultimately, we get into the shipping, better disguising of stuff. Stationery was a really good one because nobody counterfeits stationery, but the paper was heavy by volume the same way, pills are. Cocaine was a little bit lighter by volume than the pills, so you had other things that we did for that, and basically we would do like huge. Back then, used to buy the software would come in the big box, and you'd have like a disc, right? So what we would do is we'd put together these huge computer boxes, right, and 30, 40, 50, 60 kilos in those boxes with the CD-ROM still in there. The scanning equipment wasn't what it is now. They didn't have the density scanner and this and that, right? And then we'd have on top of this pallet, just layers of more stuff. So if you're looking through, you're going to find keyboards, you're going to find drives. And back then in the late 90s, this was really a booming industry because we went, AOL was out already then, and DSL dial-up modems were out already then.
Sure,
so
yeah.
what we were looking at, I was just literally going to the government websites and looking what was the biggest export stuff from the US to the UK and vice versa. And it's right there. They publish the stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
So a big one to the UK is always construction equipment. So, we were doing like the stuff you see, same shit you see in the movies, these glass bricks, right? Cocaine in them, it wasn't really super creative. It was a lot of detailed manual labor. And knowing what I know now, the fact is most of the time, because we had good accounts, high volume accounts, they just weren't getting scanned. But when you're young and they're getting through, you think you're doing something really amazing, right?
Right.
But as you know, you get older, and then when you ultimately get busted and you start reading Discovery and learning about the technology that the feds have, especially from other people's cases, you realize how lucky you got.
Yeah, I mean, I've in my case, I remember them a mile away with their van, and they had a parabolic like laser, if you will, and it would stick out from the top, and they'd shoot that laser towards you if you're on the corner in the street or wherever you might be, and they'd shoot that laser so they can listen into your conversation.
Yeah.
They would be able to pick that, and that was years ago. And another one is another laser that would actually penetrate the glass. So if we were sitting in a hotel room having a discussion about, smuggling, they could hear your conversation. Yeah. So that was back then. I can imagine what they have now.
Yeah, you know what was really interesting? Remember that movie, Enemy of the State?
Yes.
So when that came out, that stuff was already 20 years old.
Right.
Right? So imagine. I mean, it's just,
yeah.
I don't know. It's a good thing I'm not in the business anymore, because I wouldn't want to try to figure it out.
Another thing is they had it was almost like a nail, and they would take the nail and they would put it underneath where the windowsill is on the outside of the house, and they would nail it in. So and the end of it was the mic, and that way, when you were in the house speaking, it could hear through that to the layer of drywall and pick up your conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were getting their top of the line stuff. They weren't investigating us like that.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, exactly.
You guys were at the high end of the spectrum, FBI most wanted shit.
Yeah, exactly. So, but
they didn't know we really existed for a while.
But to get to the technology part,
Yeah, we didn't. For us on our cases, mostly wiretaps, and we can come back to that later. It's but we didn't get because theirs was mostly wiretaps and kind of reverse engineering with informants and pen registers. Although that was amazing, they were the GPS pings of where all the phones that call each other, all that, right? But that was pretty much it in our case, sure. At least what they disclosed. But yeah, you guys were getting the tip of the spear.
Yeah, they used everything that they could.
Yeah. You guys were probably like their proving ground where they tried all their experimental shit.
most
Anything
likely.
they could do to get their hands on you guys.
So you were running the coke and the ecstasy?
Yeah, me and my partner, Tamer Ibrahim, he also did 10 years. We beat the prisoner's dilemma together. He didn't rat. I mean, he's still my best friend to this day. Love him to death. He's like family.
You took it on the chin. Paid your dues to society for the wrongs that you did, just as well as I did. And you know what? That's I never say this. I never say, "Oh yeah, what I did it's okay" or whatever. I never say that. We all know what we're doing isn't right. But the integrity part of it is that you took the hit without putting it on someone else's shoulders. You were a man.
100%.
End of story.
Yeah, I think that. For me, it was just, I don't know how it was for you, but for me, I laid awake many nights thinking about it. Especially I was sentenced to 30 years, and then I had a CC kingpin case that they were trying to give me life on top of that.
48.
Yeah, 48, motherfucker.
Yeah.
And I'd fired my attorneys, represented myself on the 848 case, and my appeal attorney was working on the 30 years, and I was able to win, But there were many nights where I laid awake thinking about it. What it was for me is that I just couldn't look myself in the mirror and lie to myself. I knew if I made that, it wasn't, and the truth is, it wasn't that I was worried that something would happen to me or my family, right? I've always figured I'm smart enough to manipulate any situation. It was just, I knew I wouldn't be able to be me anymore to myself. And I noticed over the years, spending time in there, I was at MDC for 3 years, because first trial, then the second case, they extradited Tamer from Amsterdam, after a year. So then the CCE started, where I was representing myself. And it was, it was pretty clear to me when people would come in if they were going to inform or not. Because the dudes who always said, I could never do that to my boy, are the ones that did. And the reason for that is it was their friendship that was stopping them, and the biological imperative is very strong for survival, right? And give your brain enough time to come up with an excuse to fuck somebody else over, especially in the criminal world where you're, you know, the thing I always tell people about being manipulative is you can also manipulate yourself, right? But the guys who are like more quiet, I don't mean like reserved and hiding because they're like child molesters, but the guys who were not braggadocio types were the ones who held their mud, and they were rare. I'm not saying they were soft. I'm not saying, you know, they just didn't have, oh, I could never do this. You know, sooner or later, if that was what was holding you back and it wasn't you, because it's a very personal thing. There's many people I'd rather have seen in prison than me. I freely admit that, right? Like, but it was a personal thing for me. It wasn't that anybody owes me because I didn't rat when I came home. It was just me being true to myself. And, you know, one of the good things about the experience, you know, and there were a few, but one of the good things about not many, one of the best things about the experience is I got to find out that I was the guy I'd always hoped I'd be in that situation. And I don't wish that situation on anybody, but, you know, I tried to extract a positive from it for personally.
Sure.
Again, not saying what I did's okay, not saying I paid my debt to society, I did my time, I knew what I was doing is wrong. Okay, all that I'm just saying, but still extracting on a personal level when there's that kind of pressure and you still are able to maintain your personal integrity to yourself, I'm still happy when I look back at that I was able to do that.
And you should be. You should be.
Yeah, and I find that, you know, most people, and even me in my own life, I've fallen short of certain aspirations that I've had for myself in the past, right? Like, and I think, you know, when the chips are all the way in and it's maximum leverage, you know, you win some and you lose some, but that's the moment where it matters because that's whether it's true or not. You know, everybody can be, another example I use is a guy, I was in Coleman doing the drug program my last year at the Low there, which was a fucking horrible spot, fucking hated it. But they were giving me a year off and they just come out with where you could get a year halfway house and home confinement. And so I was going to be eligible for 10 months of that. So, you know, grin and bear it. And a guy comes by and he's like, oh, you know, you're really generous, Louis. You know, I really appreciate the chicken you gave me. And da-da-da-da. And I'm like, dude, I'm not a generous guy. I got this locker and 3 other lockers full of shit. What I gave you is less than 0.0001% of my net worth. You know who's generous? Is the guy over there across the hall that you hit up for a cup of coffee every morning. Because all he's got is that fucking bag, and he still gives it to you. So for guys like us, right, like when all the chips are in, and it's, you know, I guess just now you find out, are you really able to maintain that aspiration that you've always had for yourself? And most men come up short.
Yeah, they do. But the ones that don't, you know, touche to them.
Yeah, and also to the point where I also recognize that I came home and I didn't fuck around anymore because I didn't know that I had it in me again. And since I didn't, I told certain friends of mine that were, you know, I had to see some people when I came home and I was like, listen, all due respect, I don't have that in me anymore. I wish you all the best, but we can't, I don't want to be caught up. I don't want to be friends. I don't want to partake. I wish you all the best, and I know what my limits are now, so I got to stay on this side of the street.
Yeah, and you know what? That's admirable. You did your time like a man. You took your responsibility, and you stood the test. The test that, you know, you wasn't sure of, you know, until you put in that position, if you were going to withstand that, and you did. And, you know, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, you know what it is, man. When you get when you're looking at that kind of time, it's there's no more fire that you can walk through than that. We're going to take the rest of your life.
Yep.
The rest of your life, you're going to be stuck in here with this shit.
Yeah.
And
And if you're able to get out and not as, being as bad as it could have been, and, by fighting the legal part of it and all that, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's great, because now you have a second chance in life.
Yeah, came home, built some houses for my brother, spec homes, launched a tech company, went from prison to Forbes in 5 years.
Wow.
And then ended up mixed up in this PPE thing, which we did very well in masks, but then I got caught up in this Thailand thing with these dudes stole 2.7 million from us and sent fake gloves and, medical waste out of China. And, I'm a pretty evolved person, and I was never raised as a gangster. I didn't have a hard life. There was food in the fridge. My mom and dad loved me. Like, I didn't grow up in a criminal family or a criminal environment. I'm not the toughest guy. I've lost more fights than I've won. That's usually my disclaimer. I've lost more fights than I won, and I never work with Pablo Escobar when I start one of these podcasts, because it seems like everybody's the toughest guy in the world, and everybody worked with Pablo Escobar. But I chose to engage in that, and that's how it turned out. So the Thailand thing happened, and I'm not that, but I'm not evolved enough to let somebody take 2.7 from me. So me and Tamer went over to Thailand. And then we get arrested. I got arrested for attempted murder, kidnapping, extortion, and that cost me my tech business, because it was live streaming for insurance companies. It was called DropIn Inc. And insurance companies signing contracts with someone like me, even that I was the poster child for rehabilitation, was a difficult process to get off the ground. And then when that kind of press came out, it was really bad. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So getting back to the ecstasy, how many pills, what kind of quantity was it?
Well, the last load that they busted was 2.1 million pills in one load.
Was that monthly, weekly?
It depends. We were kids, so I tell people this all the time. We weren't as organized as you think, and as fast as we were making money, we wanted to spend it in the cars and the houses and the girls and the travel and everything. But some, and same thing with the cocaine.
Like living the high life.
Yeah, like we were just as concerned with that as the business, whereas, looking back at it, that was a huge error. If we would have treated it like a business, like you're supposed to. Again, I had television education. I didn't have like somebody in the street who brought me up,
Right.
I didn't I didn't grow up in an area like you. I didn't have, it wasn't around me all the time, right? And so really, people laugh, but I was television educated. Don't keep money and dope in the same place, and don't talk on the phone. That's what I learned. Yeah. And that served me well too, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have like a mentor explaining these things. And looking back, had we treated it like a business, and we could have done more in 2 years than we did in 3, by exponential amounts of money, and maybe not gotten busted, and maybe I wouldn't be sitting here, because I'd be sitting on 300-400 million in the Caribbean somewhere. But hindsight's 20/20, and we were kids, we were in our 20s, we had a great run, and the same thing with the cocaine, like some of it was, hey, we wanted to do more, but the Mexicans couldn't get us more, because we were like, what I did with them is I said, listen, the quantity that we're buying, 50, 60, 100, I could grind you guys down to 11. That's the going price. I'll pay you the 15. I just want the good ones. So, hey, our biggest week, we weren't Pablo Escobar. Our biggest week, we got over 100 of them out. That was our biggest week on the cocaine side. And on the pills side, we brought in about 5 million pills in 1 month.
And there was
total.
And it all came from Amsterdam?
Amsterdam and Belgium.
Belgium, yeah.
Yeah, they were refining it there. They weren't really making it there. The Chinese were making this oil, which was not sassafras oil, but it was the next step from there. And
is it fair to say that Israelis were like, were they into that ecstasy?
Yeah. So they were definitely into that, but I mean, I don't know. Listen, Odette Tweedo, he passed away at MDC, and I knew him. Great guy. We kind of stayed out of each other's way. We also partied in Ibiza together, spent time in Spain together, you know, traded notes on a couple people and a couple customers, right? Like, most of the people didn't know that he and I were friends, and we stayed away from each other's people and each other's business. Him, I had a lot of respect for. The rest of them, not so much, and they were like these guys who were like, they'd bring in 10,000 pills, and they tell you they brought in 1 million. You know, and everybody was the one with the factory, and everybody was the one, you know, I mean.
And they were Israeli.
Yeah, there was a lot of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's some of them still in Miami right now running around like they're super gangsters.
I ran into some of these guys. That's why
and they're fucking rats, dude.
That's why I brought that up.
Yeah, they're fucking rats.
Really?
They're rats. They're just, you know, running around like super gangsters, like just.
Yeah, well, they're not real hardcore criminals. They're just hardy.
Well, they're criminals in the sense that they commit crime constantly.
Well, yeah, of course.
And then they have a safety net.
They think they're tough guys.
Yeah, they have a
really
safety net of, you know, FBI and DEA agent contact handlers, and they get away with murder. You know, they get those 302 checks, tax fucking free.
Yeah, they pay
right?
them.
Yeah, they pay them. They make.
Yeah, the CIs, they get away with everything.
Yeah, they get away with everything, and the feds let them act like gangsters.
Sure.
Like, you know, and Miami's like the hot spot for them right now, but you see them here too. And you know, the funny thing about the Israelis is, you know, like the Virgil brothers, Nachman Cohen, Rosenstein, these dudes were real gangsters, right? The Virgil brothers got brought over here on an indictment. The problem was, and I mentioned this to a couple of them over time, right? I said, you let these fucking rats who rat here on fucking everybody come back over there with no problem. And they give you money and you tax them or whatever you want to call it, right? You know, a bootbull is another one. You give them money, they give you money, and you let them live, you know, no consequence, right? Where did you think it was going to end? Now your ass is extradited here. How did you think that was going to end, gangster? And they all got, you know, most of them got blown up by the U.S.
Unbelievable.
You know, Rosenstein, the Virgil brothers, like, some of them had never even set foot in the U.S., and they end up in U.S. conspiracies because once these dudes are done ratting on everybody they know here,
they're next.
Yeah, they're next.
Well, that's what they get for letting that go by and accepting that.
Yeah,
That's what they get. They reap their own
bullshit.
They reap their own, you know, shit.
Yeah, it's just a fuck. You know, it's. Listen, to me, looking at, you know, I spent a lot of time with Carmine Persico when I was at USP Lompoc, right? And we talked a lot, mainly because I never asked him any questions. I asked him one question later after we got to know each other. I heard something. But I never asked him any questions. We got to know each other, and a confidential informant on my case, he asked for my discovery when I got there. He didn't care about my PSR. I brought that to him anyway. He asked for my discovery, and he pointed out a couple confidential informants because I was selling pills through a drag queen in Miami who was a fucking great customer. And his kid, Alley Boy, had some of the confidential informants on his case were the same as mine. So Carmine pointed that out to me, and before I even got to Lompoc from MDC, he was very familiar with my case because of that, right?
He knew who they were.
Yeah, so he kind of, him and a couple other guys kind of took me under their wing, you know, like, and I played backgammon with him and every day by his little rose garden and stuff. And the one question I did ask him is, right before he left, they were opening up Victorville USP, so they were transferring a lot of people from USP Lompoc over there. And right before we got separated, actually, I think I was going to TI, which was a medium high at the time. I don't think he was leaving yet. Don't remember. It's 20 years ago. But I did ask him. I was like, Carmine, I heard you're eligible for parole. Why don't you go to parole board? And he grabbed me by the hand and he said, Louis, I would never give these motherfuckers the pleasure of telling me no.
Yeah, he knew they would.
I mean, to me, that was like, wow.
Yeah, they wouldn't.
Yeah, but to not even,
Yeah.
like, I get it. Intellectually, I get it. And,
Yeah.
like, you almost cheer for it, right? But, like, to me, that's such, like, I guess there's levels to this,
Yeah.
I mean, there really is.
Well, he knew.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to give him the satisfaction.
Most people latch onto that 1% of hope and blow it up, right?
Well, yeah.
And he was, man, great guy. Great.
It's like, when I was going to through my, court and stuff and all that and everything, and I was getting sentenced, and my mother was like at the time, I'm going to come to the court and this and that. I said, no, you're not. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not coming. Because I know that she would have got emotional in the courtroom, and there's no fucking way I was going to give them any satisfaction in that. It's just similar circumstances. I wasn't going to do it because I just wasn't going to let them have any satisfaction. And I get why he said that, and he knew he was going to do it, get paroled. He knew that.
Yeah, but what a rare bird, right? Because a ton of guys go and get rejected all the time. Of the few guys that have it left in the federal system, it's even less now, right? Because it's old law.
Right.
And but man, everybody who's got a chance goes. And Carmine, he to the very end never.
Yeah, he knew it was over. That's why.
He never buckled. He never, even at the end, didn't.
He knew.
Yeah, I mean, I got a ton of respect for him. He was.
Yeah, he took it on the chin.
Yeah, he took it on the chin, and he wasn't. He was like, this is the life. He used to say this. This is the life you chose, Louis. You're in a different position than me because you can still choose a different life. You didn't sign up for something forever. You basically did your thing with your friends, your guys, whatever, and you didn't rat and you're fine. You didn't give your word to an organization or a gang. Stay away from these prison gangs. Stay away from this. Don't make sure that you leave yourself the choice because this is the life we chose. But you have an advantage. You can choose a different life when you go home.
Yeah.
And he used to tell me that all the time. He used to say, there's nothing wrong with going home. Make sure that you go home. Make sure that you maintain the choice as long as you can.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the advantage that you had.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. He was, and as the years went by, and through all the different joints and doing 12 years, you really, after that was my first joint after MDC, and then you really see where a lot of people don't. They've either joined a gang or they're part of organizations, and they're stuck with that.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was a blessing in disguise, even though there was a demise. For me, I had my boss was a FBI informant for 40 years without anyone ever knowing that.
Yeah.
And then other guys, they turned as they went along that were in management position, if you will, and so people just started folding at that level, and so now that organization is to shit, nothing.
That's what happened with the Italians,
nothing.
In my opinion, too. Once the
Right.
top guys start ratting, and there's
So here I am. Now, if you think about it the way you put it, here I am. I'm coming home. If I was coming home and nobody ratted, nobody was a rat, or I didn't know they
You'd
were
be
rats,
stuck.
I'd come home. I'd I'd be out in the street. I'd be back in it again.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, so that was the silver lining for you.
That was the silver
blown
lining
up.
for me, exactly. And quite frankly, they figured, The word is that I'm going to come home and maybe I'll start things in a different way, in my way. Are you kidding me? Are you nuts? After what I found out, hundreds and hundreds of FBI rat snitches, CIs on the street for years that they cultivated the government. And I knew this. Knew about it because my attorney broke it all open.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going back to that life knowing I could possibly be a feather in the hat of a rat or a FBI agent. There's no way. I'm not going to be a stepping stone for any one of those people. It's not going to happen.
And then after you do Fed time and you realize 85% of these guys rat.
Oh, yeah.
Like, man, it's just what it is now. Like, to not recognize that the feds were actually very smart. It used to be people were worried about consequences of their mouth. And I always tell people, like, the interesting thing about the street is there's consequences for your mouth, right? And I don't mind that. I think, the internet could do with some of that, right?
Yeah, right.
If you just get to talk out of your ass with no consequence, like, listen, I'm totally about freedom of speech, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be responsible for what you say, right? But the feds, they raise those guidelines so high. And my friend Sinbad and G-Rod, they were 8-tray gangster Crips. They were on my floor in MDCLA, and we were going to trial at the same time. And so we were all in the main tank, and then you know how they keep the rats off separate tanks down the hall.
Same in prison, as you know.
Yeah.
They'd be outside of the main prison. There's a building, the cheese factory.
Cheese farm.
Yeah, the cheese factory, cheese farm.
Yeah, they have one at Otisville, they have one at Phoenix.
Yeah, and they have one in Fairton, New Jersey.
They have one in Fairton too?
Yeah.
So this guy, their rat comes walking by and they start screaming at him and this and that. And the dude stopped. No screaming, no yelling, no trying to justify himself. And he said, bro, it's nothing personal. I would just rather dodge your bullets on the street than spend the rest of my life in here. And, fuck that guy for ratting, right? But still, it left a huge impression on me. It makes you think, right? Like, the feds made the sentence so big that people were more scared of the feds than they were of the consequence. And it's actually, from their point of view, smart. Right. That's how they turned, where it used to be nobody ratted or very few people ratted.
Right.
And the other thing I blame is somewhere along the way, some known rat walked a line for the first time and nothing happened to him. I don't know where it was. I don't know what year it was. I don't know what joint it was. But that started to where now they're on every fucking line, every level of security you go to.
I mean, I remember my time when I was doing it, and I've had a few altercations, while I was inside, and somehow or some way, the rats that were inside they had a special number that they would pick up on the phone. They call the lieutenant's office and say, yeah, Red Shea, he was involved. I know he's the guy who beat this guy up and da-da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden, they'd start doing an investigation. I'd be called down to the lieutenant's office, this, that, checking my hands, this, that, all that. And there's just so many of them in there. I had an altercation with a guy, and this informant inside, he came in to him and he says, I know he did, I know it, just tell me, fuck him. He said, listen, I got 2 weeks and I'm out of here. I opened my mouth, I shouldn't have did it, and that's where it's going. I ain't saying anything, end of fucking story. But this guy was trying to fucking get him, the rat, and tell the story to the lieutenant so I could be locked up for that and lose good time.
Yeah, you know, when the cameras are covered, because you know how they either foam them with the shaving cream or whatever, how the fuck do they come in 10 minutes later, go right to somebody's cell and grab them if it's not? They're probably getting the call while we used to talk about it, like when something was going down, we'd literally watch the phones to see.
Yeah, because they had a certain number that they can press on the phone and it goes right to the lieutenant's
I just wanted
office.
to see all the people that are on the phones while anytime anything's going down.
Plenty of rats inside prison.
Yeah, even in the pen, you know? I mean, they keep a little bit more quiet in the pen.
Yeah, they do.
Because they can get hurt at any moment.
Well, they're dealing with guys who are doing life.
Yeah, just like your boss.
Yep. He didn't last long.
No.
He didn't last long.
No.
Rightfully so.
No. But yeah, they did him. He got what he deserved.
So let me ask you something. Through the life that you lived and the adversities and all that, do you look back and say, fuck, I wish I didn't do that?
I don't look back and say, I wish I didn't do that. What I do look back is I realize that I wasted potential that I had. And it's all the more important for me to maximize the potential that remains. So I use it as a motivator rather than, I mean, I lived a life like, listen, we've done things that most people are never going to do. I mean, me and you different, but same in some senses. I wouldn't trade that. I mean, no. I wouldn't trade. I lived more in those years than most men will live in 5 lifetimes.
Right.
I mean, there's a certain thing about it, and there's certain things I miss about it. I miss meaning what you say and saying what you mean. I miss being able to look somebody in the eye and having a handshake deal for a multi-million-dollar transaction without a lawyer or without a paperwork.
Right.
I wish regular society was more like that. You know, like the thing we were talking about consequence, right? You know, and we live in an age where guys who, you know, first at the federal level, if 2 guys commit the same crime, and one shows the personal integrity to hold their mud and keep their fucking mouth shut, and another one shows that he's got no personal integrity and he's going to rat, that person is fine to let back out into the public. But the other guy who did the same thing, who actually showed a certain amount of integrity, has to be locked up for 30 years. Like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right?
It just doesn't make sense to me. It also doesn't make sense to me when, you know, they put guys up here who are fucking rats, like Sammy Gravano. Funny story, Sammy Gravano, Sean Atwood, they just had that thing on Showtime. They were both buying from me and Tamer. That was, Arizona was our leftover shit that Bobby Stewart started with 4 Aces Entertainment. We, you know, like they were fighting over shit that we left behind.
He tried to rat his way out of that one. It didn't work for him.
Yeah, he tried to rat his way up, but people celebrate him still. Okay, he's a killer. Okay.
Yeah, that don't mean nothing.
Yeah,
to me,
there's a lot of dudes that are killers. There was a dude, you know, Bunch from Inglewood Family Blood, you know, big name on the street, shooter, everything, right? Like, had this big reputation. I don't personally know anything, but
as soon as he saw the numbers and the cuffs,
rat,
that was it.
Immediate fucking rat. And then there's other dudes who've never harmed a fly and don't rat.
Exactly. I've had this conversation quite a bit lately, and you're right. You're right. I mean, it's you know,
and even more so if you take somebody's life. In the life, right? You're kind of like guaranteeing like this is who you are. If you're willing to go to that extreme, then you, to me, you have a higher obligation to live it all the way through than somebody who's just kind of sightseeing and driving something around the corner for $5 grand.
100%.
You know, you've taken a life in the name of this now.
Yep.
Right? Or 19 as the case may be. And you should be bound to that 19 times more than anybody else.
Yep, 100%.
There's no guarantee of a happy outcome. You know, one of the things I tell people all the time, I go, you get $5 grand to drive something 10 blocks because you could go to jail. If that wasn't the case, then it would go in a taxi for $7. That's the reason why the pay is the pay. A happy ending is not guaranteed. The pay is the pay because you could go to jail. Well, okay. Nobody promised you a happy ending.
Right.
That's
So I used to have guys that would drive from Miami to Boston with the kilos and stuff like that. I said, you're getting paid well, and if anything happens, you got to realize you got to hold your water.
Yeah. That's what you're getting
You gotta
paid
hold
for.
your mud. You're getting paid for that.
You agreed to take it. You wanted the money. Maybe you negotiated a little bit more for yourself because of the risk. Well, part of that is taking the risk.
Right.
And keeping your fucking mouth shut.
Yeah, but there's so many, and you and I both know there's so many people that can't.
Yeah, no, you know. Actually, I think it's a human condition. I don't think it's just people in the life.
But there are a lot of guys that can, like the guys doing 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. You'll never see the fucking street for being men. And I don't want to say I'm an advocate, but they can't sit here like we are, then, unfortunately, and be able to talk about being, somebody who accepted full responsibility. So you know what? It's great that we are able to speak for them in a way out here when they can't.
You know, it's interesting. I was speaking at YPO in Hawaii, Young Presidents Organization, or YPA, Young Presidents, a couple years ago in Hawaii. They invited me to speak, fireside chat. Beautiful time. They flew me and my wife out there, beautiful room on the beach, had a great time. And one of the things I was talking about is I was like, two things that I think are important for people like you. You're the young presidents. You guys have a net worth of 50 million or more, right? Like, you guys are the next generation. And something you need to understand is, and I'm going to say it to you in plain English and let you interpret it how you want. I know 40 guys with life sentences that I would trust to babysit my daughter before any of you. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I know what they're capable of doing to protect my daughter, which is also most likely what you are not capable. And I'm not saying everybody with a life sentence, and I'm not saying every killer, and that's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that I know about 40 of them that I've met over the years of all races and religions, that if they agreed to take that responsibility, their life would go before my daughter's. And they've proven that because they have a life sentence.
Exactly.
There's a value to that integrity.
Exactly.
Everybody can make a mistake. Some people make mistakes that require an extreme form of payment. Understood. Sometimes that payment is violence visited upon them in the street. Sometimes it's a prison sentence. Sometimes it can be something else. I'm not getting into that. The other thing, I'm not objecting to that. The other thing is but to act as if there's no value in that human being and that has that quality, that's absolutely wrong and narrow-sighted. The other thing is, besides who I'd have babysit my daughter, is I said, do you know, you guys all run companies. Do you know that the next white-collar crime is going to happen? Everybody talks about recidivism and the rates of recidivism and people committing crimes over and over again. But the most likely for people like you, the white-collar crime that's going to happen of embezzlement in your companies, most likely is going to be from a guy without a record. There's plenty of convicts that have had millions of dollars in dope and millions of dollars in cash, and there's never been a penny missing, but none of them are on your radar for trust.
That's perfectly well said. Well said. Well thought of. Well thought of. Well, if there's any advice that you could give somebody in this world today after all that you've been through, just like myself, what would that be?
Not all money's good money. If you're not prepared to, and this is what I tell kids, I go, most of you guys are in gangs, there's a pyramid of leadership at the top, there's no room for a bunch of people. It's gonna be one or two, right? So you're never gonna get to the level in your situation that that I got to in mine. And I freely admit that half of it was luck and accident. You know, didn't realize how big it was until it was over, right? And the looking over your shoulder part, now that I don't anymore, at that time I didn't realize what an inconvenience it was. Because now that I don't live like that anymore, even that I didn't grow up as a gangster or a criminal, I can enjoy less more.
Well,
The
well
consequences are important
they are.
and shouldn't be overlooked.
Well said. Louis, I cannot tell you what a pleasure it was to have you on the show. What a great discussion. A lot of has come out of this intellectually, and people are going to love this. They're going to love it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah,
it was my pleasure when I got the call.
And thank you for being the man who you are.
You
a
too,
stand-up
brother.
guy.
You too.
Thank you for coming on.